Fault Lines.
Live from across the divided states of America, it is time now for another edition of the most disruptive show covering news, politics, and events from across this disunited country and the surface of our increasingly divided globe. In the Independent Corner, I'm your political analyst, Shane Stranahan.
And in the left corner, I am the indefatigable, a burning ember in the darkness, your political analyst, Jamarl Thomas.
And together we are Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. Hello again, everyone. I hope you're all having a great morning. And let's get into the headlines. First up in COVID news, there were about 10,622 new COVID cases reported in the United States yesterday, with about 311 new deaths. Over the past week, there have been an average of about 11,534 cases per day. That's a decrease of 15% from the average 2 weeks earlier. 46% of the total American public has been fully vaccinated, and 54% of residents have received at least one dose. As of this morning, the coronavirus has infected about 33,618,505 people across the United States and killed 604,069 people. Vladimir Putin has reportedly taken the Sputnik COVID jab, calling on other Russians to receive vaccinations. Russia is experiencing rising COVID rates with a record high death rate from COVID-19 today, and the Delta variant is apparently spreading quickly there. The latest estimates show the devastating economic impact of the pandemic on local and global tourist industries, with the global economy potentially failing to make more than $4 trillion due to the impact of COVID-19 on tourism. The UN report providing these details also said that approximately $2.4 trillion was not made that would have been made in 2020 from international tourism. Quick note here, they talk about how the tourist industry lost $2.4 trillion. There's something a little bit that's technically not at all true, and that's why I don't like to say that. The tourist industry, we don't know how much they would have made. It's not like they got, I can come back to this movie, but it's not like there was a check that was signed for $2.4 trillion that they tried to cash at the bank and it bounced on them or something. There was no check. This was money that they were loosely expecting they would make based on recent years. But, my point is, can they really say they lost it? Or can they just say they didn't make it? And it's not just an equivocation. It's like, I guess my point is the wording actually kind of matters here. This is it's not like something that was stolen from them. It was an opportunity that they failed to find.
The only thing that is real are the things that has happened. Those that didn't happen.
It's true. That's
it didn't happen.
Exactly.
Meaning, it's like, yes, you can forecast whatever you want. Reality doesn't work on your forecast.
Exactly.
It's like, get over it.
That's my point.
In fact, one of the screaming things about the capitalism thing, right, is you have the capacity to go bust. This, so in fact, the justification for the reason that they make this great wealth is we took a risk. Well, risk entails risk.
Yes.
And the fact that the COVID thing, that's called risk. That's what that is. That's risk being, that's why you're supposed to make the big bucks and everything else. That's your justification. That loss of that year is your justification for all of your previous wealth. I hope that makes sense, right? I mean, basically, they're saying, all things being equal, that the reason that I make so much cash is because I took a risk. I put my money down. I could have lost this money. Most businesses go bust. I took the risk. All of these people got jobs and everything else as a result, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
I'm making a point that the COVID thing is the risk it manifests. It's the reason. It's the justification for the other stuff. It's like part of the reason that you're happy is because you were sad at other times. It's that. And so it's like, yeah, you're right. That. You can't say that I didn't get something because it never existed.
Totally. It would be like if I were complaining about how we lost all our listeners to MSNBC and Fox and BBC. It's like we had all the world's listeners. No, we didn't.
It's like we forecasted that we were going to have this many listeners in this particular year, and it didn't happen. We lost all our listeners to somebody. It's like, this nonsense.
No, the people who listen to us. It's just how it works.
It's an expectation, but the expectation is not the same thing as
I hear you.
Real life.
And again, maybe we can come back to it. I didn't mean to. It's it could become a deeper philosophical thing, or it's just like, I guess it paints them as the victim, and I don't necessarily feel like they're the primary victim here or anything like that. And the language of losing, you get my point, I think.
I get your point.
Carrying on here.
Yeah, I get your point. I agree with you.
There's something going on in North Korea that is quite confusing from the outside. Kim Jong-un has referred to a great crisis, has to do with the coronavirus in some way, and it's being speculated that it has to do with coronavirus circulating in North Korea, which, as far as we can tell, they have prevented it from doing so far. But now it's spreading, and Kim Jong-un has sacked some higher officials. Anyway, trying to keep you up to date on that. I'll let you know more as I learn more about that. In national news, Tucker Carlson claimed on a show that the NSA is spying on him. The NSA has denied that he's been a target of theirs. This is in a formal statement they released. That's a denial that Carlson criticized as, quote, an infuriating, dishonest, formal statement, end quote. We'll come back to this, I'm sure. More than a dozen dead have been found from the Miami building collapse so far, with another approximately 150 people still missing as local authorities continue to pour through the rubble, attempting to rescue survivors. International news, the United Nations has called for immediate access to be given to the Tigray region in northern Ethiopia. They're calling for roads and airports to be open for deliveries as tens of thousands of children's lives are at risk, reportedly. The military coup authorities in Myanmar say they'll release some activists as part of a wider release of prisoners. The junta has arrested more than 6,000 activists and political figures since taking power in the beginning of February, opposing Aung San Suu Kyi's government. And reports from Italy show that another 7 migrants have died in a crossing after a boat capsized near the island of Lampedusa. Another 9 were still missing. Dozens, however, have been rescued and are now in safety. Those are our headlines. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. And you guys, so I was sick yesterday, and I'm still feeling kind of sick today, and I kind of want to go to the doctor at some point to try to figure out if there's something underneath it. But just heads up for the audience, that's what was going on. There's a chance I will also leave a little bit later, but I'm hoping to stick it through. But I was listening to the show yesterday.
Venereal diseases are hardcore, man.
Oh, Jamarl.
I feel for you, man.
On. No, if anything, it's even more embarrassing. It's like gastrointestinal distress, which is, how do I talk about that in a pleasant way on the air? I'm not going to try.
So speaking of that, and I know that's a weird segue. Malaysian Prime Minister hospitalized for diarrhea. PM office reports.
That is the most natural segue ever, Jamarl.
Well, I guess my thing is somebody hates this guy. Like, if you think about it, somebody in this guy's office hates his guts.
To leak that out.
Like that. And to have, I mean, this is on Reuters. Front page of Reuters. Yeah. When his face is like, no. That's a horrible headline. That's a horrible headline. Who would report that? Why would somebody report that?
I don't know.
It's like, oh, his stomach hurts. He's going to the hospital.
I think
you just stay with that.
They just want us to be there with him in spirit and heart, sitting at his bedside, listening to the noises.
I don't know anything about that guy, but somebody hates that guy's guts.
Yeah, no, they do.
Yeah.
I'll stop making
he kicks a puppy in past life. I'm sorry. When you mentioned intestinal distress, that's what I thought of.
That is completely relevant. But here's where I was going. This is much more of a pivot than that. You guys were, I heard you talking about it, and I just want to bring it back up myself, the Assange thing. With this witness, Siggy, big witness, long-standing witness in the case.
We have the clip if you want to play the clip.
Who was effectively recanted. But yeah, this is a big story. And to his credit, we had a caller call in the day before who tipped us off on the story. Tarif also tipped us off on the story.
Well, just to be clear,
you would heard about it.
He didn't tip us off on the story. He browbeat us.
He was like, you guys should cover this. Cover this more.
Right.
Well, if I had known about it.
Because I had known about the story. That's my point. It's like, you didn't tip us off, dude. It's like, we can't. Look, I've been burned by running stuff.
Before it's verified.
Yes.
I hear you. But on Saturday, both Snowden and Greenwald commented on it, which it's not like that doesn't prove it. It doesn't prove anything, but it puts enough.
Solidifies it.
Exactly. It solidifies it enough where I'm like, okay, I'll step behind this story quite a bit more. If I had seen it, I would have.
I didn't see their backing of it.
It's a huge deal, though.
Part. Yeah.
And it's okay. So, in my opinion, why is it a huge deal?
Can we pull the clip? It was from yesterday. It's
awesome. Yeah, we'll get to this in just a second. I would say it's a huge deal. It's not a huge deal. Okay, so yes, for people who were already on Assange's side, it's not like this is going to win you over anymore. But in terms of making the case explicitly,
the US case.
There is no case against Assange.
It makes it very clear.
It makes it very clear. It's just another nail in the right part of the coffin or whatever for that case, sending out the death knell. And so it's good. The fact that this story is coming out, I hope it gets a wider reception. I hope that Stella Morris, Assange's family, are able to make hay out of this and use this to turn the tide, because it could do that with, the number of people. I'll put it like this. The number of NGOs and independent activists coming out together. I believe it was late last year, earlier this one, talking about Assange and advocating for Assange. I think it was earlier this year. Yeah. Representing for Assange, basically. All the more. Hopefully that continues and this just accelerates that, because we might reach a critical mass. It doesn't seem like we're potentially that far away even.
I think, like I told Misty, I made the point to her that, it undercuts the case, but the case was never about the case, if that makes sense. Like, it's the case was never in this kind of like, okay, this person was arrested for marijuana possession and he was taken in front of the law and the judge dispassionately throws him. It's not that. It's something more of, okay, you've embarrassed the state, you've embarrassed the intelligence assets. We're coming to get you. And here's a fig leaf. they were going to use to create a pretext for it. And they were going to torture you for 7 years in broad daylight and then drag you. It's
100%.
And so
that
it's
is,
like,
that's the predominant.
there was no there
I get
in
it.
the first place.
I get it. That's the predominant level. But I feel like these things operate on several levels simultaneously. And
Yeah.
if there is a genuine legal threat that is being talked about, and is the meat, is the sort of substance of what they talk about when they talk about Assange.
Yeah.
If it's like the bread and butter of, okay, this is why he's probably a criminal when the news media covers it. Like that, if you can come in with cigar cutters and eat away at that fig leaf or whatever, if you can trim away at the fig leaf, pretty soon there's nothing left. And legally, even though that's not the ultimate motive, that's the justification. If you can get rid of the justification, the house of cards falls apart. That's my take. And I could see that happening. But I hear you. It's the interest of a state.
OPCW. The OPCW leaks. So you have a situation where the state has a very specific interest, and we want to undermine Syria. That's what we want. Okay. We come up with a justification for it. The OPCW is basically pushed to say, there's some kind of chlorine something there. And then you find out, well, not so much. Or at the very least, that hypothesis has been challenged significantly. And instead of dealing with that, the media just says there's no there. And just literally ignores it.
But Julian Assange,
it's that nonsense that I get ignored. That I'm concerned for the Assange thing.
And that's why these things, if you can discover the true facts in a story, it doesn't magically and retrospectively change the story. It doesn't change the narrative, and that's not what's going to happen. But
but reality matters.
OPCEW. Wait, this is the thing. You say it enough times, you're like, wait, what is it? OPCW, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. I need to rework the acronym in my brain. Anyway, they do not have the name recognition that Assange has, and it's not nearly as high profile a case. And the journalistic class, some of whom are definitely worried about what happened to Assange, and they're like, okay, they've been cautioned. Yeah. The room has been sufficiently chilled or whatever by these actions. My point is, Assange is more of a figure to rally around. Yeah. And so I could just see it happening. And I don't think this is vain optimism or whatever. We'll see what actually happens, but I could see this helping to turn that tide.
I think people are less ideological than I think we think they are. And I think they're governed by their feelings, even in professions, when they pretend as if they're not governed by their feelings.
Yes.
I think when Donald Trump got elected, it shocked the conscience of all of them. It just shattered all of them. All of these guys who, I love the George Bushes of the world, the Jeb Bushes of the world, the Hillary Clintons of the world. I think they got like just shattered. In their heads, Assange was responsible. That's what I think. And so under normal circumstances where this normal thing of like, all right, self-preservation of journalism in and of itself, and how this is a shot across the bow, to put it mildly, of journalism. And what does this mean for journalism in the United States if you're going to go after a journalist? What does it mean for the U.S. to have global jurisdiction, but nobody has access to our protections? Like, think about that stuff. That stuff is profound. But the journalists here, I think they're in their feelings about that stuff because of the elections. I really do. I mean, if you go back and listen to some of the things that these guys were saying, like, we thought we could be neutral, but now we realize that that's not the way journalism needs to be done. Or even CNN, these guys are just in their feeling stuff. I mean, this is not even news at this point.
But people are goldfish, and people can just switch from one feeling to another depending on the way the wind is blowing.
That's true. But you would think that there would be some level of self-preservation in regards to this. Look, when Obama was in office, Obama was like, that's a bad idea. Why was it a bad idea? Because it goes after, meaning there's no way to create a distinction between who Julian Assange is versus who, I don't know, whoever's writing for the Washington Post.
No, totally.
That type of stuff.
It became useful to throw Julian Assange under the bus in 2016. They did that, but still, that doesn't mean that the reverse can't happen too.
It's like, again, I just haven't seen it.
Depending on which way the wind is blowing, you could either smell the roses in the garden or the crapper. You could smell, what's in the lavatory. Depending, and that'll characterize how you feel about the state of events, how you feel about what's going on, and what you think the smell in the room is or whatever, what you think the feeling in the air is, which is what a lot of journalists are looking at, because the feelings that you're talking about, these aren't just, they're personally afraid, they're fitting themselves into a class of people with ideas about these things. Exactly. You get my point. Once those can change overnight, weirdly, and like in a completely out in the open way, even though they're going against their own motivations or whatever, you can switch.
I can't see we're in corners.
You can switch from hating the idea that the virus originated in Wuhan to completely accepting it within like a week or two. You get my point. Yeah. I could, anyway, we got other stuff to talk about, and we're going into your soapbox. My point is, I'm a little cautiously optimistic about the Assange case on the other side of this big disclosure that Siggy one of the main witnesses in the case. Just to get the facts
let's play
out.
the clip.
We get the clip. Andre, we asked him to play the clip. Andre, let's go into this clip real quick.
This is just the latest revelation of how problematic the United States case is against Julian Assange, and in fact baseless. Of course, as you outlined at the introduction, the evidence from Thordarson that was given to the United States and formed the basis of the second superseding indictment, including allegations of hacking, has now been on his own admission. And we have been calling for this case to be dropped for a very long time, and this is just the latest form of abuse demonstrated in this